Hello, everybody. Welcome to Story Sessions' very first author talks. And I think I'm going to come up there. Hi, everybody. Nice to sort of see you today. um, Again, this is Story Sessions' first author talks. And we are featuring Ellen Blum Barish today, who is the author of the new memoir, Seven Springs. Um, I'm really excited to interview Ellen because I've had the pleasure and the luck to have been friends with Ellen for the last, oh my goodness, maybe almost a decade. And we've certainly been through some emotional, artistic ups and downs together. And it's really fun to be interviewing her on this just extraordinary up moment, getting her memoir published. And she was on Story Sessions, it must have been like 2015, I think. And she presented a story that she had been grappling with, I think, and we'll ask her more specifically, for a while before she came on stage. And her stage reading of it compelled her so much that she felt like she had more to say about it. And she began digging into this memoir. Now, Ellen's background is in journalism, and then she came to personal narrative. She published another memoir. I'm not sure the date on this one. About sort of, I think it's called Musings from the Office Window. She'll have to correct me on that probably. But Ellen's been writing for a long time. She's been an instructor at Story Studio, which is how I connected with her. And she also had a literary magazine for many years called Thread. And Thread is just a great website resource, and also live shows that showcased writers with personal stories. So again, I'm just really excited to talk to her today. And I know some of you out there are here for Ellen, and I hope some of you are out there because maybe you're thinking that you have a story that isn't quite contained on the stage and want to open yourself up to a new medium. So without further ado, I'm gonna welcome Ellen to our talk here. Let's see. Hi, Ellen, how are
Hi,
you?
I'm
Nice
great.
to see
Happy
you.
to see you.
Yeah, thanks for making the time tonight to chat about the book. So I guess
Thrilled.
first and foremost, uh, how did this, I touched on that you had done this on stage, but how is this developed for you, and over what amount of time did this story come out of you?
Well, it's actually been decades, if you can believe that. It's one of those marker stories that I believe everyone has at least one of those. And it's that big story from your life that everything that happens after um, is altered dramatically. It's that moment that something very big happens that just changes everything. And it's because this for me happened when I was 12, the precipitating event that ultimately became the focal point of the book. Um, I was a young girl, and so I wasn't fully processing it at that age. And I think it took until, I mean, I'm 62 right now, so it took me all those decades to work through it and understand it and come at it from different angles.
Hmm.
And so, truth be told, I've been writing about it from different angles for pretty much probably about 3 or 4 decades. It was,
Wow.
it was a short form newspaper column. It was a very, very short radio commentary. It was very briefly a terrible, horrible poem. It tried to be a short story that also suffered horribly because I am not a fiction writer. And then it was a long form essay, and then it was a short form essay. And then probably around that time is when I was bringing drafts of the story to our writers group that we have been together in for many, many years now. And I think there were a good 3 versions that I brought
Oh
into the
yeah.
circle that still I was working it out to get it so that it was more than just a recounting of an event, but that I was turning into something that I felt was artful and that
Hmm.
had some meaning. So it's been through a lot. The
Yeah.
story itself has been through a lot of versions before it ended up as a book. Yeah.
Well, I can certainly attest to having heard many of those. And I do specifically remember the time that you read what you did on the stage, and I think was, not clearly not the final form of the story, but maybe a bit of a breakthrough for you. And, I know we have some storytellers out there probably listening, and, maybe they've already done memoir, or maybe they're thinking of dipping their toe into it. How, I remember when you did that piece, and it was like we had listened to a few versions, and then you did that one, and we were all just quiet. We were all just like, "Oh my God, you did it!" You felt it, we felt it. How did telling the story on stage? What kind of feedback or feelings did that give you that continued to compel you into memoir?
Well, it's a wonderful question. It's super poignant with the content of the memoir, and that is because it's about having been silenced as a young girl and not having had the chance to voice or express what happened. The literally, the sheer act of standing on a stage that big. It was at the City Winery, as you recall, which is a very large venue. I think there's maybe 200 to 300 seats in there, but maybe there was about 100 people that day. And there I was on a very large stage, which I always like to say that Bonnie Raitt played there, and some of it's a mega stage with a blue room and the whole bit. And it was very
Blue
uh,
room, blue room, or green
or
room?
green room. Oh, whatever color they call it. Is that what they call it? Thanks. Now
I
I
don't
know.
think it was actually green, but yes.
Okay. Right. It was the back room where they served very fine food while you waited, which to me, I'll never forget that as long as I live. So the whole experience of having that backstage experience and then walking to the mic and standing in front of a mic that was in that large of a room with that many people in it, and quite literally breaking a silence by speaking that
Mm,
story into a microphone that spread to so many people. I didn't know it at the time, but boy, did that broke me open.
mhm.
Something almost cellularly changed for me that day after. I felt it, didn't know what the heck it was, but it was sort of incubating after that.
Mhm.
And I really did try to ignore it because it was comfortable,
Yeah.
right? But sometimes those very things that are uncomfortable are what sort of stalk you and plague you and make you pay attention, and ultimately, so that was 2015, and it was late 2016 when the title came into my mind, and the
Yeah, and
title,
that's I
yeah,
wanted to
yeah,
talk to you about that
yeah,
too.
okay.
So with the title, in the memoir, you talk about how you had decided to take a year off from writing, which I remember. I remember our conversation. I think I was sadly to blame for that decision.
Yes, you were sadly to blame for it. No, not sadly.
Well,
Gratefully
actually,
to
it
blame.
ended up great, but like, what precipitated that choice to not write for a year? And then I just found your description, and maybe you can give that to our listeners too, of like what how the title Seven Springs, which correspond to seven different sort of milestones in your life that pertain to this story.
Mhm.
Yeah, so how did that happen?
Yeah, it was crazy. Um, so, oh my gosh, Seven Springs. So you and I talked about an inhale year and an exhale year. It was a quote, I recall, that you found. I'm not going to be able to pull up the guy's name, but he's a singer-songwriter. And
Yeah.
you remember? And he was talking about that an inhale year is the year that an artist absorbs and that the exhale year is the time and the period where an artist makes, creates content. And you and I were talking about that in somewhere along the line, and I did decide that I was sort of feeling overstimulated by all these versions I'd been trying to get at the story, and I was consciously going to take one whole year off from writing that story in particular. I was going to do other kinds of writing, but not that. And so I called that my inhale year, and I was only about 6 or 7 months in. It was an interesting period of time, and I was sitting in my red velvet chair in my living room that a dear friend of mine who's a writer bequeathed to me after she passed. It's a very special chair for me. I call it my creative Mary Ellen chair. And there I was minding my own business when, quite literally, these 2 words, 7 springs, feel as if they've fallen into the screen of my mind, almost like from up there into my lap. And quite literally made me get up out of my chair and start searching through the journals I have kept all my life. It was a clue, and it was really sort of a, what's this thing about 7 springs? And the quick story is, I discovered there were 6 very poignant springs that were powerful, that were stories in and of themselves. And I thought, well, that's weird, because where's the 7th? But the 7th spring was to happen the following year at my 40th high school reunion. And so something about that structure just locked into place, and it gave me a way in to the larger version of the story, which was what, a 10-minute story on the City Winery stage, right?
Right. Yeah, a way to sort of compartmentalize each story, but still have it be one cohesive story.
Right.
Which I really love that. And I love the descriptions you have of spring in the memoir, in Philadelphia, and like it's very, just the sense of spring is very present. And of course, those of us in Chicago like only know spring for like 10 minutes a year,
Right.
but it does have this very special sort of feeling of excitement and rebirth. And I think, I love that your story captured that. Now, you were talking about as well before about this theme of silencing, right? So I guess what I'm wondering with that is, like, we a lot of times say, like, you need to find your writer's voice. Just find it. Like, is it under the table? Did I leave it someplace else? Like, it really irks me when it's like, find your voice. But I mean, in literally finding literally using your voice, going from being silenced to using your voice, do you feel like your voice, like as a writer, has developed because of this memoir?
Through the writing of this book? Oh, absolutely. And in fact, it is interesting to write such a long form piece when you're used to writing short essays like I have. Also, just to go back to my first book is a collection of essays called Views from the Home Office Window. You were close.
So close. I was so close.
Yeah. But what's true about that is those were 750 word essays that were newspaper columns that had been edited. And so I've always worked in the short form. And in the short form, sure, you have a voice. Of course, you can always pick up, any writer who's been doing it a while, you can tell, even in that short of a form, probably who wrote it. You can get a sense. But there was something else entirely about carrying that through, 200 pages or 150 to 200 pages is a whole other thing. That I struggled with that. And I will say that the structure, that 7 spring structure that locked in that day was so key. That helped me get anchored and grounded. And I also started to think of each of those springs in small bits, like each spring was a sort of a long form essay. And because I am an essayist, really, by training, I really feel more like an essayist than a memoirist, even though now I guess I am a memoirist too. But I kind of like,
you can be many things.
Can I please? Thank you. And actually there is a form called a memoir in essays, which this sort of is kind of like that. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
each of the chapters could sort of be standalone, like
Mm-hmm.
they're better together. It's
Yes.
more of a fray, but they do have a sort of a standalone quality to them. So that helped me breaking it down into a small bit so that a chapter felt like it was complete was really helpful in with the structure, and it helped me kind of connect back to my essay voice, which helped quite
That's
a bit.
great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Um, something that comes up in this is your bond with other women, right? And maybe could you give a short summary? And maybe we should have
Yeah.
started up top with this. I'm
Yeah.
assuming everyone's read the memoir, but maybe some people are interest has been piqued.
Yes.
And could you give a sort of synopsis of the inciting incident of
Yeah.
the memoir, and then maybe touch on some of these women that were so and continue to be so important in your life?
Yeah, that's great. So the quick little sort of, we call it a log line in the biz, and that's the one sentence description of the book is, the story arc takes place between the 20th and 40th high school reunions. There is a memory comes up at the 20th reunion between two women who've reconnected, and it's a memory of a very, very frightening auto collision between a Volkswagen station wagon and a Mack truck. No small
Mm.
event that really alters the life of the mom who's driving and her two daughters and me. I was the one getting the ride home from school in 7th grade. And so this was the event. And basically, I was pretty much the only one that was able to walk away from that accident. I had the least amount of physical injuries from that accident. Everybody had a variance of more, very much more dramatic medical issues that needed attending to. And yet it was 1972. So there was pretty much a let's move forward. You know, the whole era was all about let's not dwell on it. Let's just move forward. And so it wasn't until 97 at our 20th reunion that I see this classmate of mine whom I hadn't seen in so very long. The conversation comes up, the memory is reconjured, and all of a sudden there's a lot of memory loss and a lot of memories gained and a discussion, and it sets in motion this sort of what we call sort of a psycho spiritual adventure detective story that has me sort of wondering what happened and piecing it together, which culminates really at the 40th high school reunion. It really takes that good 20-year length of time to over the course of 7 springs, because what the spring reference is, the accident happened in April of 72, and spring has still this effect on me. You know, there is such a thing called an anniversary syndrome, and I do think those of us who have had marker stories in certain seasons, is very possible and very common for the season itself, all of its aroma, all of its sights and sounds, to conjure back up something that moves you, or that disturbs you, or it's just a trigger. And it always did for me every year. I felt both this push-pull to wanting to go to Philadelphia. The action of the book takes place between Chicago and Philadelphia. I'm kind of a two-city girl. And anyway, it does sort of come in. There is lots of self-discovery and lots of clarity gained, and some a little bit of the Dorothy story. Some of the stuff was literally there the whole time in the backyard, waiting to be discovered, right? And then I think there's a lot of redemption in the very end. I like to believe that there's redemption, and there's mostly really healing. But you are right. The cast of characters involves this friend from school who I've lost touch with, and 2 other very close girlfriends who kind of are with me on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I would say, a sub theme of the book, which is this desire for us to want to know and understand these big marker stories that happen in our
Mm-hmm.
life. This this desire to not remain silent, and this also the encouragement of women friends, and that connection between old and good friends, to kind of get at the truth and to sort of bear with one another
Mm-hmm.
when there's a long struggle to go get there. So I see that as a huge part of the healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love, all of your friends you've been friends with for your whole life, and seeing those relationships grow in the story is really interesting.
Yeah.
Also, in the story, your spirituality grows over
Yeah.
the seventh season. And I found it really interesting, and I know you as so steeped in Jewish tradition and your love of the stories and the the mysticism of some of it, and that you didn't really grow up with that. So how has this story, how is it intertwined with your spirituality?
Well, thank you for mentioning that. That's another very, very key theme. It didn't start out that way. You're right. Both of my parents are Jewish, and I was brought up with some Jewish tradition, Reform Judaism. I ended up marrying a man who was raised conservatively Jewish, so he had more, I would say, more ritual in his life than I did, and it was important to him that our daughters be steeped also in that. So there was a sort of a logical. I was going to get more educated about being Jewish at that moment, but I also discovered that I fell in love with it, and that was an accidental love affair. I just really loved adult education, and I couldn't get enough of it. I still can't get enough of it. Um, and you're right, it's the sort of the mystical stuff that was particularly powerful and shows up a lot. For example, many, many years after this accident occurred in 72, it's the same time of year, it's a similar kind of weather, a similar time of day, and I get into a second accident. You might recall there's a chapter that there's sort of a do-over accident, and luckily no one was hurt. The cars, however, were very hurt. Both were totaled, but it was literally, I was traveling the same direction, the same 3:30 in the afternoon. It was kind of a foggy, misty day, and basically the cars ended up in very dramatic. I ended up on the front lawn of someone's home. It was a pretty scary accident, but I now see that as the way that accident was handled was all very much out in the open. There
Mhm.
were people coming to my aid, and we were all just talking about it, and it was a dramatic difference from the accident that had happened decades before, and there was a small here, actually a powerful healing that took place then, and I couldn't help but think about that as something that um, felt too wasn't just coincidence to me.
Yeah.
It just felt,
And I
yeah,
think you mentioned at that part as well, something about the directions coinciding with something spiritually as well. What was that? That gave me some
yeah.
chills.
I was traveling in both times. I was traveling north, and the cars ended up west. And in many, many traditions, the western location is represents. I hope I'm going to say this correctly. Kind of a full circle.
Mhm.
Um, kind of there is a healing aspect to starting out going north and ending up going west.
Mm.
And even more than just in Judaism, I mean, in many, many traditions. So that was noticeable and interesting to me. I mean, I couldn't ignore some of that. That sort of was like the first that was the first moment I started to see, I started to make more connections. And then really
Hmm.
it was the study of studying Torah and paying attention to so many things that happened later that um, are too numerous to get into tonight, but
Yeah.
you have to read the book to kind of just find that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you also, brought up, and I think you mentioned the journals that you refer to throughout your research for this, right? And
Mhm. Yeah,
you've kept journals your entire life.
yeah.
I mean, I know that I think you were among the people. I burned a lot of my journals, like when I was like Marie Kondoing my house. It was like I felt like it was some sort of cleansing. And all the writers were like, "Oh my God, don't get rid of those," you know. And so far I haven't missed them, but
Okay.
it sounds like you're more of a you keep a diary, and that this really helped, right? Because memory is this really tricky thing. I always say
Mhm.
I'm a storyteller with a horrible memory. Just like not, I try to take lots of notes when things happen, even if I know I'm not going to write it then, just because we lose so much.
Right,
Um,
right.
so with the journals, I mean, one of the really monumental things is that you do end up late, very late in the game, finding your own description and not even remembering the things that you're writing. Like you wrote, that the same person wrote this, but you have no recollection of it. Um, I mean, what was that like? And maybe we can just kind of talk about journaling and like what that means to a writer too. But finding what you were looking for, like in the back of your closet, must have been staggering.
That was a moment. Yes, and just one slight but still poignant clarification. In the end, it wasn't an actual a journal entry that I found. It was actually a class assignment for a teacher, for my eighth grade
Ah,
teacher. Yeah. So, and what's interesting about that is that I was told at the time of the accident, and it was had to do with all kinds of complicating factors that I should not really talk about it. And there was a lawsuit that I later learned about, and I took that directive very much to heart. I was a good girl. I listened to what I was told. I obeyed my parents. And so the not talking about it in my mind also included not writing about it. And so though I kept a journal, a diary my whole life, never once was there a mention of this whole event in any of my diaries. And I went through them
mm.
numerous times. And I'll just add quickly that later on, I also burned my journals too. I picked and chose, and it felt great. I had a big, wonderful night where I threw them all into the fireplace and drank a whole bottle of wine, played all sorts of music to cry to. It was a fabulous night, and it felt great. But I kept a couple. But that said, it was still, I never found any mention, not a clue, not a hint, not a little like any kind of leaving or footprint. And in
Hmm.
the end, what I discovered, because I keep papers, school papers, and early drafts of things, what I found was on page 13 of an 18-page handwritten autobiography for eighth grade, which I never got to page 13 before because it was just
Hmm.
so hard to read. But by page 13, all of a sudden there are 3 pages all about details, every single detail that you are absolutely right. I have no recollection of ever writing. And so that was quite a moment on a number of levels. The the oh my God, memory is so unreliable moment.
Hmm.
Oh my God, this has been here the whole time moment, that whole Dorothy moment of it was here in my closet this whole time. I could have pieced all this together. And so again, why now to find it? It was right before I was headed for my 40th high school reunion. So the timing was fascinating to me.
Hmm.
And then I was able to then corroborate a lot of those details with my friend with whom we my seatmate in the accident. And we had a very, very long and very detailed dinner. It was very, very healing and very powerful that we were finally together, breaking the silence together over dinner,
Hmm.
that this document had helped precipitate. But you are right about memory, and I've done a lot of looking into why it is that we're so lousy at it. And and it's, and especially being trained as a journalist, trying to get those facts right has always been
Right.
important, right? But I
Hmm.
do think I'll say this about, just as if this is helpful to anyone. I will say that what we do remember is the emotional truth of something. And so I was just
Hmm.
reading today about a woman who getting a divorce and remembering just how cold it was in the courtroom and how her hands were shaking. And she was sure she was wearing a sweater, and incredible detail around cold and frigid and frozenness. And when she found a document that showed what month she actually did get her divorce in, it was like the heat of August, and
Wow.
it was the absolute opposite of what. And so what she's remembering is how cold it felt.
Hmm.
It just felt like a cold, dark day. So to me, this is fascinating, because this is just that's remembering incorrectly, but she's still remembering something very important about that moment. It's
Right. Sort of
true for her.
the idea of truth versus accuracy.
Yes,
Right. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Well, it's I find the whole truth versus accuracy really interesting. And, I think that I can guess here. I think I'm correct in saying that you would recommend for people to keep journals, and certainly anything I've ever read about creativity, and, I think Julia Cameron and morning pages, right? Which I used to call my rage pages. Nobody ever wants to, I was in an artist way group, and someone thought that they left it on the train. And like it's like leaving your soul exposed, like just leaving your soul on the train. But not everybody writes journals or has those,
Right,
primary sources. So would
right,
you have any recommendations to people who are digging in the past, but they don't really have the physical material to
right.
dig through?
Right. No, that's great. It certainly depends how long ago it occurred. I mean, the beauty of today and online research is there's really a lot you can find. Certainly,
Hmm.
if it's an event that happened that made the news, you can dig around in old newspapers, and you can find all kinds of these days, of course, on all social media. You can find the footprint of it, at least. But I mean, I guess I'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago, and that is, if you're writing um, a, a personal narrative in order, especially a long form one, in which you're trying to get at some big story, big marker story, and you're trying to go for meaning, and you're trying to go for poignancy, and you're trying to make it artful, I would say don't worry so much about the getting everything right, all those absolute, dates, um, all that stuff. It doesn't really matter, as long as in the writing it's clear that there might be and some wiggle room. I mean, it's okay. I always tell my writing students that it's okay to wonder about something on the page. It's okay to
Mm-hmm.
say, it could have been May, but it might have been June. And then you're saying to the reader, um, I'm being honest with you. Um, I don't know exactly what month it is, it was either this or that. And you have to choose those moments for reasons. You
Sure.
don't want to just do that all the way through. But there is something about that. When you're writing memoir, you are trying to connect with your reader as you would on stage, right?
Hmm.
With any story, but you have to make yourself vulnerable as you would want to on stage, right? But you also have to be reliable to the extent that you're being trusted all the way through. You're basically taking your
Right.
hand, their hand in yours, and you're walking through the story, and you're saying, here's mostly what I remember. There's some things I don't, but at least if you're getting an emotional truth, then you're getting a story, I think, worth hearing, that's been processed through and been, kind of worked through. And it's really okay if not every detail is there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I think lessens the stress of some people, where it's like, where do I what memory do I road do I even go down, which
Right.
can also lead to some dark corners of the mind
Right.
that are sometimes hard to go to, so
Right.
it's really interesting to think of, how we all play with memory. And I always say there's no fact checkers, right?
Right.
Actually, for memoirs, I think there are, but on stage there aren't.
Right. Exactly. That's for sure.
Don't take that, yeah, don't take that too seriously though. So I want to turn to Facebook here and see if we have, hello everybody. Thank you for coming, and if you've joined us a little late, talking with Ellen Blum Barish about her memoir Seven Springs. And I'd love to get some questions from you guys and see what you want to ask Ellen about. So I'm going to turn my head to the side because I got another monitor over here. So I'm going to go look in. Let's
Tech
see.
queen over there. Love it.
All right. Oh, everyone's got something to say about journals. Karen O'Donnell said, my journals are something I did not want anyone else to ever read. Some terrible first drafts, yes, and a few sob stories.
Oh, yes.
You can't even read my writing. That's fine, right? David says he loves this memory. Anybody have a question out there? I'm looking to see if I can scroll through all of them. Facebook can be a little weird. Well, while I'm waiting for those to come in, I will ask you on a little bit more of a technical note. There's writing a memoir, which is a whole bag of worms, can of worms, bag of worms.
Both.
It's probably a bag. It's more than a can. It's definitely a big bag of worms.
A bowl of worms. A barrel of worms. Let's call it a
barrel of worms. That's what it is. And how about just, oh my God, this one word encapsulates so much: publishing. Okay, you have it. You've done it. You've gone through editing and more editing, and then another edit, and then some more edits.
Mm-hmm.
Then what? Yeah, exactly.
Are you referring to all the potential mistakes that could be in there, or
no, not
there
mistakes,
are,
but more so the process of finding a publisher. I mean, you ended up with Shanti Arts, but I know that you had some fits and starts with agents, and just like, how do you find the right home for your memoir? Yeah, I'll just stop my question there. I'll ask another part.
No, it's a great question, and it's everybody asks, and and I understand why. So I did have I guess I've been told that I was lucky to have an agent. Those are hard to find, and she and I worked together for 6 months, and it was. She did absolutely everything she could. She was trying to go after a certain echelon of publisher, and what many folks are saying in the biz these days is, if you're not, Michelle Obama, you're not a celebrity. Memoir is sort of, you hear this a lot, memoir, it's hard to sell. And it's true. On the other hand, well, it's true at the level she was going for, which is sort of the big 5 New York stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided at the 6-month mark, thankfully, amicably, to part ways. And it was great. There was no drama there. It was just, she gave it a try, and she's got to make her money. And anyway, so we ended our relationship there. And I then took on the task of going after smaller indie presses. And that took some work. And so that's just research, but luckily it's easy to do these days. You look them up, and you look for the independent publishers that are looking for women's memoir, the word memoir, spiritual memoir, women's mentor. I was looking for certain key themes. Mm-hmm. I must have sent query letters out to, I always like to try to remember this number. Oh goodness, it was a good 30 or 40 letters that I sent out. And it was a heck of a lot of rejection, a couple of possible, can we look? That always, perked you up. It was a long, arduous, not fun period of time. But then one bit. Actually, it was a week where 3 indie publishers were interested. And that was amazing after such a long time. And all really there is to say is it's like dating. Right? It's been a long time since I've been dating, but
It's
it's
all,
like,
I mean, it's all online, so it's
well,
like,
that's true. It's actually more like dating than it used to be, right? And so
publishing, it should have, publishers have Tinder. That would be hilarious.
yeah, I mean, you're kind of looking them up online, and you're seeing what their interests are, and what they don't know what they do for fun on Tuesdays, but you know what their interests are, right? And you're trying to find that match. And this particular publisher really was a perfect match. She still is a solo female publisher, publisherpreneur, and she does poetry, memoir, essay books, art books. She's a photographer, and it turned out to be a very good fit. And to me, it was an example of it needs to be a fit, because then you have a working relationship for a good year or so, and you need to be able to work with that person. So yeah, it's a process.
How do you like keep your enthusiasm and hope? And I mean, I know so many people, like you said, 30, 40, and so many stories of people doing it, and having it not work out, and going back and changing their content to sort of maybe reflect some things that are more desirable in the publishing world at the moment. But I mean, I know Stephen King had said that he like wallpapered his walls with rejection letters.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Which
Yeah.
I always think of that as sort of like, yay, I got a rejection. That means I'm trying. But at some point, it's not like, yay, I got a rejection. It's like, oh my God, like how many of these can I get? I mean, do you just feel like as an author, I always think that's just how, I mean, of course, somebody could put it out there and they could snatch it up right away, right? So it's not like it's everyone, right? But I would say probably 99% of authors are in this sort of long slog that's really different than writing. Like you have to have all these skills now as writers. You have to be able to have a social media following. You have to be able to manage that yourself. You have to be able to look for these publishers and write these letters, and those are all things you had to learn, essentially, being a one person writing, publishing, and promoting machine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Which some people are like, I'm a writer, I don't do that. And of course you can always hire people to do that kind of stuff, and most of us are not on the kind of budget that allow us to hire our own social media manager. But how do you feel like that impacted just the actual, like, getting through the submitting to publishers? Like, do you feel like you had to learn a lot in that process? Did you take any classes? Did you talk to other authors?
That's a great question. I would say that the journey post writing the final draft, I don't think people talk about this enough, was so powerful and had such productive impact on what ended up being the final draft, that I urge people not to. It is a long slog, but if we could only think about it as a whole, like the writing of the book, and then the selling of the book, and the finding the cast of characters that you want to ultimately work with, is all part of the whole process. And frankly, all of that made the final cut, so to speak, better. And so in fact, the long wait even but the book was bought in June of 2020, and the book came out in April, May of 2021. That's almost a full year. And certainly in that time, there were other eyeballs on the manuscript, proofreading and editing, but also I had time. There was marination. And I had some distance. And so I just felt like every time I was going through those pages, I could tweak it a little, and it was just getting better and better and better. And I would say it made major leaps just in that last production year. So Is it a long, hard slog? Yes. Is it fun? No. I mean, sometimes it is, but it's all for the purpose of getting it out there, which is such a wonderful, powerful, poignant, artful, healing. It's just such a big thing. It's
Yeah.
worth it. It needs all of that tending and attention. It needs that whole production to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've seen you really grow, especially with social media. Can you give any advice to people I mean, you're going to inevitably be sort of judged on your social media. That's what publishers are going to look at, and this is just the world we live in. But I'm wondering, like, with social media, you can't just like have a following. You can't just like start when you start trying to publish your book. You have to build it really over a
Yeah.
long period of time,
Yeah.
or shift what your social media is, which is what I've seen you do. You used to focus a lot on photography, which you still do, but then you open up this other side to yourself,
Right.
and being somebody who writes personal stories and performs. I'm constantly checking in with myself on social media on like my level of vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm talking about vulnerability, if I'm saying you should be vulnerable, here's how to be vulnerable, and I'm not,
Right.
then am I really, am I really living what I'm talking about and what I'm teaching to people?
Right.
So how did you shift your social media for those people out there going, well, I have a social media, but how do I
Right.
get a following? How do I get people involved? What's your advice?
It's a great question. So I should definitely shout out two other women who are entrepreneurs were fabulous in helping me learn about this. Ashley Renard and Allison Williams have a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful free online group called the Writer's Bridge, and their sole purpose is to share all these wonderful tips about building that very thing, platform building.
Mm-hmm.
For people who are writing, women in particular, but I think women and men who are writing books. And so I started taking that workshop, so to speak, back in August of last year. And you are absolutely right. The message that I got from that is if I'm writing a memoir, I have to put myself out there and speak to the themes that are in the memoir. And so,
Mm-hmm.
what I now have learned to strategically do is highlight the things in my life that relate to the character in the memoir, the person whose journey it is. And so, things like Jewish spirituality comes up, women's friendship, healing, childhood trauma, the process of writing, the returning to old wounds, all those things interest me. And so those were my focus when I was working on social media. And what I found is I connected with other readers and writers who were interested in those themes. And so when it was time for when my book finally came out, there were people already in my bucket. I had
Right.
met like-minded people who
Mm-hmm.
wanted to buy the book because they had seen it, the drum roll. It was
Right.
powerful. It was very powerful. It was really helpful.
Yeah, and I think that there's a great thing about demystifying the process to people,
Right.
along the way, so they celebrate the win with you too. That it's not just like come out promoting,
Yeah.
but like what can I offer that might be inspiring to somebody else,
Right.
which you're really great at. And also I'll add a recommendation too. But like if you're out there, you're talking to people, or you read an essay online, look up that person and connect with them. You have to get away from your Facebook being just your family and your high school friends, to really build a following. And I know that's really intimidating to some people, and they can say, well, I don't like doing that, I don't want to do it. But I do think there's a lot of reward in it, both I think personally, professionally, and then, just in terms of actually having people want to buy the book.
Right.
And I have to mention that I put 2 links in the chat to the Shanti Arts, which is what you recommend people to go through. And then also I'm putting the Amazon one on there as well. Now you did an audio book, right? Which I'm really excited about. I loved watching you in your closet doing that, which, by the way, the closet, for any of you who don't know, the closet is the best place to make a recording. All the clothes soak up the noise. So you can get Kindle and the audiobook through Amazon.
Right.
And then Shanti Arts for the actual book. Also, I believe, is it still at Bookends and Beginnings as well?
Yeah, I still have many copies. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, Bookends and Beginnings is a really fantastic bookstore in Evanston. If you guys haven't been, definitely check that out. I know I get really excited when I go into bookstores now and I look for, my friends' books, and I'm like, oh, there it is. It's on the shelf. There's just like such a rush from just like seeing it done, it's like so contained and wonderful. Let's see, we have some other questions here. Eric asks, how did you deal with presenting sensitive personal material involving the characters in your memoir? What discussions did you want to have, or maybe you tried to avoid having with those people in your life before publishing? What a common question when it comes to writing about your life. Definitely, it's hard sometimes. So what were your grapplings with that? I mean, your friends are in it, and of course the women who are in the accident as well. And I know you actually discuss it, like you even have the emails that you write to Jenny, I think. Which so what's your
it was important to me to run everything by the people who I quoted, for sure. And so at one of the final stages of the draft, I did run most pages by people who were in the book. That just felt important to me because I didn't want to take anybody by surprise. And it offered up, certainly it was time consuming because it did offer up chances to talk things through. And of course, guess what? Memory wasn't always synchronous.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And so, we had to kind of come up with some sort of happy medium sometimes. But I know memoirs all do it. Some memoirists strongly believe that they just should write what they want to write and they don't need to show it to anybody because it's their work and they have a right to feel that way. And that's fine. I just that didn't feel comfortable to me. I still felt like I was writing about real people and calling them by their first names. And I wanted them to be on board. So that was how I did it. And I'm glad that was a decision that I'm glad I did, because at least nobody's surprised, if they, they might not love everything that's in the book, but at least they can live with.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's nerve-wracking. I mean, I've had friends tell stories, just humorous stories, not even anything deep. And it's very nerve-wracking to like be in someone's story. In one story, it was like the joke was like that I was such a crazy driver. And I was like, am I? Oh no, is other people see me?
Oh, I know.
I mean, again, it's like just hearing that I was like, oh, and it's like no one cares, it's just a funny thing, but it is this like very, your character is in someone else's hands,
right? And there is a difference between seeing it in black and white in print in front of you. It's even more so than just hearing it, maybe even on stage. I'll say there's something about reading it. It's so, talk about concrete. There it is in black and white. It's not going away. It's right there. So it's powerful. And so, it's a thing. It just is part of you kind of have to be crazy enough to do this. You have to be stalked by a story. You have to be absolutely haunted by it. You have to want to write it something fierce, because it's the only thing I can think of that keeps you doing it, because on the face of it, it sounds crazy. Why would you want to like put all the people in your life into a story that they probably are not going to all see the same way you did? I mean, it really, on the face of it, sounds nuts when you think about it. But
Yeah.
if there's a story you sort of feel burning to tell, you just and that's what it was like for me. It wasn't going away. It kept coming back. It is what it is. So that it makes all that, it makes you sort of feel like it's just the most important thing. It feels like it's the most important thing. And so you have to decide for yourself as a writer how you're going to handle the people,
Right.
because we love our people. We have people in our life. We need our people. And maybe sometimes we don't. It depends
Well,
on.
we love that Anne Lamott quote. I always loosely paraphrase, but that if you wanted to be a different character in my story, then you should have behaved differently. Now that's definitely a tack to take that I would say is far less respectful and compassionate than the road you took. So it's everyone's choice. I respect anyone's choice in what they write, because they're the ones that have to deal with the fallout. And I think that's what you need to assess, is what's going to maintain relationships that you want to maintain, right? And that just being able to have that conversation, I would recommend to anyone. And I think it's so much, any memoirist deals with this. There's no way that you can't. And your memoir is really, there's so much instruction to me on how to deal with it, because you like I said, you had the emails, you document the back and forth, and I just found your emails to be like, wow, that is a great way of putting it, and it's such an open and honest and loving way to take care of the people in your story who you love, but you may not have loved everything they did in their lives, and but again, it's that balancing. Like, I love you, but everything's not perfect. I mean, anybody who loves anybody can say, like, there are some things where you can be like, well, this and this, but the love is overriding, and that's really what I get from your story. And that probably many people were perhaps moved on their own journey, by seeing themselves reflected in your story.
Yes. Yes, I know for a fact that one character in the book has shared with me, one, I shouldn't say character, but one human being in the book felt very healed just by the reading of the book and working it through with me. And that's, to me, that was everything. That was powerful. That was unexpected and icing on the cake. In addition,
that's great.
To the book itself. Yeah.
Well, if you can believe it, we have been talking for an hour.
I just noticed that.
I can talk to you for an hour any day. Yeah. I can talk to you for 2 hours about this.
We've been known to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to remind people, I put the links to the book, the Kindle, the audio book in the chat. So if you haven't gotten Ellen Blum, it's also an incredibly fast read, because it is, I can even hold up the book here. Look at little baby Ellen. Oh, so cute. But, you're looking at something that you can read, and it's compelling enough too to read in one sitting. So I can't recommend it enough. Everybody, if you don't have it, go get it. If you have it, get more and give them to your friends. For those of you storytellers out there who are thinking about memoir, I hope that this gave you a little bit more of a roadmap on how to do that. And Story Sessions is going to continue with these author talks. I've actually gotten a lot of messages of authors who would like to participate. So it's all about how fast Jill can read memoirs. I think. So I'm not going to declare a consistent date with it quite yet, but I'm planning on doing one of these a month. And thank you all out there for coming and listening. And Ellen, I just want to say, for myself personally, it's been such a joy and such an honor to see your work grow and continue to grow, and that you lift us all up. You really do.
Um,
And to see your voice get stronger and stronger is just a wonderful thing. And this memoir was truly, reading it, I was like, this is Ellen's masterpiece. It really is so artful and interesting, and the way that you delve into things, it just really makes me delve into myself, and want to deal with things maybe a little bit more spiritually and gracefully as you do. So thank you for having this chat with us. And I'm going to see if anyone else here in the Zoom. Oh, Sue Fink says she's ordered it. She's waiting to receive it. Debbie Welch says, what a great conversation. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Ellen, Debbie. Hi, how are you? John Ham, hi. Oh, sorry, I didn't get to your question, John. You just call Ellen. Thank you, guys. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all for coming, spending some time with us.
Great.
Thank
And
you, Jill,
we'll see. Too. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll just stay tuned on the Facebook page, or join my mailing list if you want to know when the next one is. Yeah. So, awesome. All right.
Bravo. Well done. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.